The Sober Sojourn's 12 Steps and Passport Stamps podcast features recovered men and women who are practicing members of Alcoholics Anonymous. We do not claim to represent Alcoholics Anonymous or any 12-step program. We are friends gathered to discuss our experience in recovery. The discussions in this podcast represent our own individual experiences and opinions as of today. You can reach us at our email address, which is sobersojournspodcast@gmail.com, or on Instagram at OyveyAA and Such a Sally. We would love to hear from you. Our aim is to try to be helpful by sharing the realities of our recovery, how we have recovered and are trudging the road of happy destiny wherever we go.
Pirate Mike and OyveyAA presents The Sober Sojourns, 12 Steps and Passport Stamps podcast. Sojourn's 12 Steps and Passport Stamps podcast.
Hi, I am OyveyAA.
And I'm Pirate Mike. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
I was gonna make a joke. I'm like, hey, I think we just took like a 5-minute bathroom break before we recorded this one. No, it's been
I'm a nervous peer. I pee nervously, so I have to take a break before we start. How do you feel about the first episode, though?
Good, actually, yeah. I mean, I had a chance to listen to it, right? Because I guess I like the sound of my voice more than I think I do. No,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't really. But no, there was it was good to be able to listen to it outside of the actual recording process because I caught more, I mean, I was totally listening to everything you had to say, but then having the space to like think about it separately. And I like to pause and think. So it was good. How about you?
You do like to pause and think. I agree. You're a pauser by nature. No.
Nervous pauser.
He's nervous. Yeah, no, I listened to it and I think I laughed and I cringed kind of the same amount, which is, I guess, yeah, you know what, that's a good amount. So yeah, it was fun and getting like nice and kind reactions from friends and stuff like that. That's like the best part. And yeah, definitely enjoying it. Definitely enjoying just all of it.
Yeah.
All of it.
I know that was one of the things, right? It was like, okay, let's put it out there and it reaches who it reaches. And then, but honestly, if it made one person laugh, and if that person was even just me,
It was me. Yeah,
it's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay.
It was just us. But I'm really excited for today. And the reason is that I think once we started talking about this is the first ideas that came up, which is America.
Land of the free.
Home of the brave. No, I feel like this is such a disclaimer. If any Americans are listening to this is going to be a fun one. I have a lot to say about it. And but before I start going off on my kosher exploits in the United States.
Is that the episode title?
Maybe. I don't know. I have some episode title ideas and I'll tell you later once this recording is done. But I feel like this might be a two-parter because, as I say, way too much is that the US is way too big. But before we get into that, I really want to hear about your experience because I'm a little unclear on that. Because I know it was like vastly different than mine. How old are you when you got there? Do you mind sharing some background around that?
Yeah. I mean, I was 18 when I moved to the US. It was right out of high school. But in the first time that we visited, because I had family who was already living over there, and I might have been like 8 years old, and that was first US trip, first Disneyland experience, So we had that.
Wow. Oh, did you go to Disneyland?
We definitely went to Disneyland.
Amazing.
Dad shares this story where I guess he built up this expectation, right, that he was gonna take these kids on a plane across the ocean. We land in California, and then we're going to be so awestruck by like everything that we see. And
Mm.
he tells the story, like he told this story over and over again. How like we landed in the airport, we took a bus to the hotel, and we're in Los Angeles, right? And he's like, Mikey, look at all the palm trees, like and all this, and I'm unimpressed. Apparently, I'm just like, oh, we have those too in the Philippines. And it didn't mean that I wasn't impressed, but I just, it wasn't palm trees that I was interested in seeing. The US for me has always been this so where I grew up, I'm not going to speak on behalf of like everyone in my country, but that always seemed to be the American dream was always the dream. It was always something that I
Yeah.
saw on TV, right?
Yeah.
Our at the time our shows were delayed, so I was watching like TV shows that were from the 70s, 1970s and the 1980s, and
Oh,
whenever
I
I
love
saw
it.
that, I know. I was like, so imagine my shock when I came in and it's like these people don't look like anything like the ones on TV. They look so much more contemporary. Um, but
They're
things
not
like
in black and white.
they're not in black and white. They don't have that weird poofy hair anymore. What's going on? Um, like things like snow. I mean, we didn't have snow, so the idea of a white Christmas, even though I knew the song, was something that I always like held up to fantasy. And so it that was kind of my relationship with the US. It was a very idealized one. A lot of the cues, I think, socially, culturally here in the Philippines, there's been a love affair with America since I don't even know, 1930s, 40s, 50s, like the Hollywood dream. And so I always kind of
Mm.
looked at it that way. And I did, I grew up in an international school. So another story that my dad used to tell is like, for as long as he can remember, I never even thought about settling down here. It was always like I complete school, okay, so you go to college, and it's a given that college is in the US. I don't even
Mm.
think I considered Europe. It just always seemed to be the track. So
Interesting.
when I did move over, and I was angsty teenager wanting to make that geographic move, it was just it was more emotional, but it also felt like just the logical conclusion of growing up. Like I'm finally gonna get the fuck out of here and I'm gonna be in the States.
Oh, yeah, that statement of getting the fuck out of here. But wait, so when you were 18 and going to the States, did you already sound like you're from California?
I don't know. Maybe no, I think a little bit. It depends on the crowd. Maybe you can relate to that. Like I do, I
Yeah.
it has been pointed out to me that I don't know any other way to put this. It has been pointed out to me like right now, for example, I'm probably adopting more of my white voice like that.
Your white voice.
Like
Your
friends
white voice
and
and your slave name.
like yeah, exactly. Friends will call up like at work and there were a couple of friends who called me up in the office just so they could get a laugh. Like, why are you answering in that voice? Like you're such an asshole. But I guess it's just something that you pick up. I guess I did. I guess I did kind of sound like this already back then.
'Cause I was shocked. When we talked for the first time, I was sure you're from the States.
Yeah,
Imagine my disappointment.
disappointment. In my head I was. And then
Yeah, in your head.
finally, after several years I was where I sound like I belong. That was awkward.
Oh man. Wait, how long did you spend there, all in all?
22 years.
Oh, dude, I think you're American. I think you might be one of the populations we're gonna insult today on the episode.
No, I am a paid subscriber. Believe me. I mean, as much as there's criticism, I was just talking about this like in preparation for this conversation, right? I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about the US, but make no mistake, like I'm fully subscribed to being an American as an identity in a lot of ways,
Mm,
but also an Asian American, also a foreigner who's living in the US. I am a citizen, right? So
yeah.
actually coming back here, it took a while. There was this idea of like, well, I'm Filipino American, or we have a word here, balikbayan, which is like returning to the country. So that kind of
Yeah.
identity. And so I struggled for the first few years trying to reclaim something like a Filipino identity. And then last year it just kind of felt right to like, fuck it. No, I'm an American of Filipino descent and I'm living here again.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. It's really interesting. It's like you move somewhere and you spend enough time there and it has enough emotional kind of, I don't know the word, gravitas. Like it has
Yeah.
enough, it has made enough impression on you that your identity is forever linked with that experience, and is a part of you.
Nurture, right? There was so much grooming. Like I can say that not intentionally, but because of the school that I was put in, there was very much a preparation for life in the States. And I
Yeah.
think that we all see each other in a similar way. And I wasn't prepared for like, oh, wait a minute, I don't necessarily see color in the same way that you do.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And also, I mean, speak of experiences, you got sober there,
yeah.
so I'm imagining most of your years or like a lot of your how do you say it? Like, well, there's no nice way to say it, like awful fucking time banging my head against the wall drinking was done there and then getting sober there. So obviously, it would be home. I don't
Yeah,
know, like my sober experiences that I've had in different places definitely made a big impact on me because it's where I developed my higher power and where I kind of found this thing, right?
yeah.
So that's interesting to me.
How did how did the US look to you when you were growing up abroad? Like what was your conception idea of it?
I love that you're saying go growing up abroad and we're both not there right now.
I know abroad, right? That's so funny. Like even abroad, foreigner. I'm like relative to what?
Relative to what exactly? And that's the McDonald's thing you're talking about, which is such a great thing. But I think that for me, and again, that's very important to say before I start shitting on it or making my trying to be funny observations about it. The USA was a dream. It was the
Mm-hmm.
dream. It was the biggest dream ever. And I think when you're not from there, it symbolizes this idea of freedom and opportunities and
Yeah.
privilege, especially if you're from a country that has experienced, different types of difficulties, whatever. And I think it's in our collective psyche as quote unquote foreigners,
Mm-hmm.
that the US is freedom. And even when I went there, and even when I saw it was deeply flawed, I was never disillusioned from the idea that this is something I need to aspire to.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, no, I love it. I truly do. And I think that part of the reason I made fun of it or am making fun of it or I'm shitting on it, and I realized that when I was there, my first month there, because I made a lot of jokes. And I don't know if you've noticed, Pirate Mike, I use jokes as a defense mechanism. Um,
We're family that way. Yeah.
yeah, like subconsciously, I thought that if I like saw the things that were wrong with it, so like when I leave or if I can't succeed there or make a life for myself there, like I'll know that it wasn't perfect as I made it out to be or this ideal that I hold about it. And I still do. I still have big US ambitions,
Hmm.
even though it's again like not to get into the healthcare and shit, but I'm like, there's a lot of stuff there. Um, but yeah, my experience getting there was one of the most wild experiences I've had in my life was getting to the US, I think, for sure.
Right? Because that wasn't like your first destination, right?
No, that's the thing. I traveled for 2 years and I
Hmm.
just wanted to go and I was bitching about not going because I needed a visa. And now, by the way, just to put it out there, I did this whole thing of going to Israel, getting a visa. 3 months after I got my visa, they took away the thing that you need a visa.
Oh.
So you
Oh.
can just go,
All right.
basically.
Wow.
That was three
Yeah.
months after I got my fucking visa. I paid the US Embassy. I put the US Embassy on my resentment list on my 4 step.
It's
Anyway.
a no, that process is, I mean, I get it. That process is so fucked. Like I remember because it took a while for me to get to citizenship, right? And so there were years when I was in the US and checking on a website to see when my green card processing date was
Mm.
going to be next, right? Like, so they did it by months and years. And I remember it was like the year 2000. And I look back on it and it's like, okay, for the Philippines, we're processing applications from 1991. And I was like, mother, that's the, yeah.
Wow.
And even
I
then,
mean, fuck.
when you get in front of the, I really want your experience. It'll just like a quick story. When you get in front of the
Oh,
person
please
who's
do.
going to give you the stamp for the green card,
Hmm.
um, that was a moment of like the powerlessness of that because I sound like this, right? And I'm already working there, and yet um, there was something that was wrong. I forgot. It was someone who was just doing their job, following procedure, and the way that I was in the country already, even with a pending green card application. Um, I won't get into that, but it was unconventional. And so this person doing their job didn't really know how to line that up with their process. And so they were like, no, I think you have to go back to the back of the line. And to see somebody actually
Wow.
stamp what amounts to like rejected
Oh my
from
God.
across the table was fucked,
Oy vey.
you know? And so when you talk about, you get it, right? This is the dream. And then it all comes down to somebody with like a stamp.
Yeah, I do. I remember, I mean, again, this is very different things. I am not close to any green card territory. By the way, if anyone of the listeners wanna, I don't know, hook me up with a green card, if anyone wants to, anyway,
The marriage proposals are going to start now.
they're just gonna flow in. No, this is funny, but also like rooted in like true events that I'm not gonna get into in this podcast. But
Part two,
I
part
get
two.
it. Part two. Oh man. Part two. Next episode is gonna be called Relationships with Americans. Uh
Um, okay.
but wait,
So wait, so
wait,
visa. So now you get so I'm so
I
tempted to
can't
just
go
launch
back
into
from
it.
that.
No, you can't.
Oh my God, no,
Um,
it's so funny. Yeah, I just remember being in the line for the visa in the embassy in Tel Aviv. And mind you, again, by that time I was I had a lot building on being able to go into the United States. And I was just I was shaking. I was shaking. Um, I actually tried to like dumb myself down so I wouldn't sound so, coherent in English. So I did like an Israeli
interesting.
accent.
Really?
So they wouldn't, yeah, because it was a tourist visa, right? So yeah, there we go. There we
Yep,
go.
yep,
He's
yep,
pointing.
yep, yep. I
No,
get
no,
it.
I was truthful and all that, but it was very scary. And once I got that, I was like, oh my God, thank God. And I remember the day I took my passport from the embassy in Tel Aviv. I was sitting at this restaurant. I'm like, I'm booking my flight right now. Like,
Mm,
and that flight was actually to Costa Rica, but it was just, okay, I did what I needed to do here. I'm getting the fuck out. Um, so yeah, yeah. But I remember, so for me, kind of like the backstory of the US thing, not to get into it too much,
go.
because there's other people involved. But again, lifelong dream. I've been traveling for 2 years at that point. Um, and I booked my flight. And again, for me, going to the US was like the thing. I have family history there. Um, my mom used to live there, especially New York. New York was the place that, I had a picture of New York above my bed when I was a kid,
Oh yeah.
like the Brooklyn Bridge. Oh yeah,
Yep.
you're feeling it?
I have had a lifelong crush on New York City.
Oh man.
First, like, yeah.
I know it's something, and especially, I had this history there, and I had all this like media being bombarded at me about this thing. So right before I went, I was really anxious. I spent 2 months in Mexico. I was really, really anxious. I called my friend, my best friend, and I was like, I don't know, like I have this visa, but what if they won't let me in? Like, what am I gonna do if they're not gonna let me in? And then he told me like, well, you're not Moses.
I might need
It's
some
raining now.
explanation. What would
Oh,
Moses have been
I
able to
think
do?
No, Moses famously had a US visa, but the point, because Moses like died basically not going into the promised
Oh yeah,
land
yeah.
because they
Okay,
didn't let him
yes,
in. So
yes.
he was like, "You're not Moses. Relax." So I'm like,
They,
okay.
they
That
stamped
made me
denied.
laugh.
They stamped denied on his application to go in.
No, guy was like, "You're not going in." And that's because Moses didn't do an Israeli accent when he tried to go into the
I mean,
promised land.
right? Play the game.
Yeah, don't hate the player, hate the game. Oh God, this is going great. No, I was just super nervous and I went in. They didn't even look at my fucking visa. Like I was so stressed. It was again, and I came in after like 2 months in Mexico, so completely different vibe.
Hmm.
I land in the Atlanta airport after taking a few flights from like Mexico.
Atlanta was your
Um,
port of entry. Okay, your entry
yeah.
point.
And so I go in, they don't look at my passport. I see a huge American flag thing. I'm like, take my picture.
Yes,
They
yes.
take my picture, and then someone screamed at me, there's no pictures here. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go in. Please let me in. Went inside. I go through TSA. I've never. Okay, Mike, do you TSA? What is what is going on with that? That thing is so wild, TSA.
Tell me. Okay, I'm interested because for me, it's kind of a given. I'm like, okay, so
Yeah,
they, yeah, so why was it
I
wild?
think I think it was wild because first of all, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like going to Israel would probably be like a lot of questions. Um,
Oh, okay.
but and like they have that in Israel, but in TSA it was just like they were like angry with me for like
Oh,
being
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And then it was like huge men and they were screaming, no water, no soda, no juice, as I was putting my bag in the thing. And then the person I was with at the time, he leaned in and he whispered in this line that everyone was dead quiet on, except the TSA guy screaming, no water, no soda, no juice. And I burst out laughing. It was such a good joke.
That's
But I was,
so
it
amazing.
was such a weird thing. So I went there and I've got people like hyping up Chipotle for me. At that
Hmm.
point, people are like, you have to try fucking Chipotle. And I'm like, guys, I'm a foodie. I'm from Israel. I spent time in Italy. Like, don't overhype this American fucking thing. I had Chipotle at the Atlanta airport. Like, I had my first chicken burrito, right? In the span of the few months I spent in the United States, I reckon I had about 74 chicken
Chicken
burritos.
burritos.
They put crack in that thing. I don't know.
If it's good, it's
Yeah.
good. I have friends who like, what if you really want Mexican food, then you should go to, you know what? If it's good, it's good. What am I gonna say?
And again, I spent 2 months in Mexico. I had the Mexican food. Like I came very Mexican food. Like I was done. I don't think Chipotle is really Mexican food, right? But I don't
Offended,
know. I dream
offended
about it
Mexican
at
foodies
night.
are starting now.
Just typing on there.
Yeah. What do you mean?
What are your Chipotle's Mexican food? Damn
Seriously, fuck whatever else you have to say about the
it.
US, but Chipotle, don't you fucking dare.
So get started. Dude, no, I have all the love in the world for Chipotle, honestly. Like I have people that are my friends that every time they're next to a Chipotle, they like send me a picture at this point. It's like a running joke. I'm like, okay, I guess this is what I'm gonna be known. This is my legacy. I had too
Chipotle.
much Chipotle in the States. Dude, that chicken burrito is fire.
It's good. How
Get in
okay,
the
so
comments.
let's talk right. Let's talk about the portions. Were those shocking for you at all?
Oh my
Because
God, yeah. I
I don't
remember
know what it's like for you.
I'm an elitist. I'm from the Middle East, so I think we have the best everything, you know.
Okay.
And I remember getting there, and first of all, again, the backstory is I landed in Tennessee. My first US destination was rural Appalachia.
Nice.
Um, Yeah, I have a lot to say about the South. And a lot of love too. But who's got time for that, right?
Well, it's a three-parter now.
It's a three-part. I remember I walked into a Walmart, which is how all good stories start, right?
Mm-hmm.
I walk into a Walmart and I need to get like tomato sauce, right? And I'm looking at the aisle, and I think it was the first time I was close to having like an anxiety attack in sobriety because there were like 100 different kinds of tomato sauce. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
stood there and I froze, like literally froze. I'm like, what is this? Like and the portions of the food, as you mentioned, right? Like huge. I'm like, I felt so unhealthy there. I had to like make a conscious effort to get on a bicycle. And then I was on this bicycle and I'm like, I don't want to be on a bicycle. Like, this isn't Italy. Like,
Mm.
it's not the little teeny tiny cars. If this semi trailer hits me, I'm fucking gone.
It's not the little teeny tiny cars.
No, like, God, the huge car. I mean, everything was bigger and better and capitalism on steroids. And it was kind of
Right.
disconcerting at the beginning, honestly. It was too much for the system. And again, I spent 2 years traveling
Yeah.
all over the world. And yeah, I've never felt as foreign as I did in the United States, but that's a whole other thing to get into. So yeah,
That's,
were the portions too big for you?
I mean, it was something so the first scolding that I got from my parents, like when we were in the US, had to do with the portions because we were in the LA airport and I was thirsty and they gave me some money to buy a drink. And like, I don't know what it's
Oh
like
man.
now. So at the time, I'm like 8 years old. Our large size drink here in the Philippines is like the small in the US. So I was like, I'll
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
get
yeah, same.
right. So I'm like, I'll get a large Coke, please. And they hand me this like fucking thing that can,
A bucket.
satisfy a bucket, right? That can satisfy a small family. And so I'm bringing it back. And I think it was like 10 minutes to boarding. And my dad's just like upset, right? He's like, why did you order something so big? You only have a few minutes before you have to board the plane. You better drink all of it. And so I'm like,
Oh my
oh,
God.
yeah.
Oh no.
But
Did you?
I don't remember. I remember more the fear. I probably didn't. And then there was just, I had to deal with the disappointment for the rest of the flight, right? The
I
side
remember
eye.
the fear.
Like,
Oh
oh,
my God. But you know what?
but
I
that
built
was
up
it.
tolerance to it.
Over
That's
time I
the thing
did.
is that, yeah,
Yeah.
like
In
that was the
college.
experience.
Yeah.
Of course, in college.
In college. And it was, it was college, but also through like eating at in Boston we had like Bennigan's, Chili's, and TGI Fridays, which are already like fairly large portions even for the US, I think.
Yeah.
So it took me maybe like three-quarters of a year to finally finish an entree. Before that, I'm just throwing money away because it's
Oh my God. I mean, I used to save the food. And then I remember I'm comparing again, going back to the Chipotle, but
yeah,
at the
yeah,
beginning I had I had a chicken burrito and I had to like eat some of it
yeah.
and then save some for later. At the end of my US time, I'm like, I'm with the chicken burrito, I'm with the queso and the nachos and the guac.
Right,
I'm
right.
like, I gained a lot of weight going to the US and I remember even going to the grocery store and seeing like the fruits and the vegetables. And I'm like, something's wrong with these fruits and vegetables.
Something's wrong.
Like they're way too perfect. They're way too big. They look way too shiny. Like a banana shouldn't look this perfect, okay? Like
Yeah.
it was suspicious produce.
I wish I could go back to that because I don't know, like if I were to enter the US now, because you mentioned it, I mean, we won't get into the socioeconomics of it, but it feels like the vibe is different than it was when I first came in. If you asked me to draw like the US metaphorically, I would probably draw something that looked like the flexed bicep of a 1980s action hero with a tattoo of an American flag and an eagle like on top of it. You know what I mean? Like that's how it felt. When you say like bigger and badder, that's how it felt.
Yeah, it did. And I think for me, again, you had like your experience mostly like in California, right?
Mostly California, except for, the 4 years when I was attending uni in Boston.
In Boston. But
Yeah.
these are like big, I think that's the thing. I felt a big difference between the big cities and like other parts of the US. So you had the big cities, you had this like cultural, like just so much diversity. And I felt that in New York. I
Yeah.
felt that in New Orleans, which is a total fucking vibe, dude. Like New Orleans. Um, Jane from the podcast, she told me like that I think she said something about like how it feels like almost haunted. And I totally
Oh, that's
agree
so
with that
cool.
vibe. It's like such a cool fucking vibe. The
Oh, I
New
fuck with that.
Orleans, like
Yeah.
Asian, whatever. Yeah, New Orleans episode dropping. Never. Uh
I'll just live vicariously through the episode. I'll be like, I've always dreamed of it.
no, but I've never been to California, that's the thing. But I think that the difference is again like the different parts. So when I landed in Tennessee,
Yeah.
it was first of all, it felt like the Stephen King universe because everyone was so nice. I was like, too nice. I'm like,
Oh.
is this like, why are you so nice? Why is the service so good? I'm from the Middle East. Like you eat your food and you get the fuck out. Like they're like, oh ma'am, like let me get you
Oh,
some of that. Like,
there's
and
none
they're
of
so nice.
that. There's none of that in
Oh
the Middle East.
no.
No?
Heck no.
No customer service.
It doesn't exist. You're like, eat your
Interesting.
hummus and get the fuck out. You're taking space. Like, yeah. I don't know. I felt very foreign there, but I think everyone was really nice in the South, and there is that kind of Southern hospitality thing.
Hospitality. Hmm.
Um, and again, I have so many fond memories of it looking back, and so many wonderful things I experienced there. But again, for the context of entertainment, I'm gonna shit all over it now.
Let's go.
No, this is actually a really interesting conversation, but what I noticed about it is that it was really xenophobic immediately.
Okay.
Um,
South or
and
like the
the,
US?
good question.
We
I
start with
don't
the
know.
South. We start with the
Let me
South.
start with the South because by the time I made it to other parts of the US, I was already kind of used to it. Just my experience was, and again, strictly speaking about my experience, it was really xenophobic, and people picked up on my accent really quickly,
Okay.
which, I like to think I sound American. I know I don't. And they asked me where I'm from, but they never asked it in like they're actually interested. You know what I mean?
I was like that,
Like in
like
a bad
far off,
way.
like, oh, where are you from? Like that? Like kind of,
No, more
oh
in a
no.
way of like, where are you from and what are you doing here? Kind of thing.
Oh, that
That
got
was
dark.
the
Yeah.
tone. Yeah.
Okay.
That was the tone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a
Um,
very, we can talk about that. That's a very different experience than what I get. I mean, I'll contrast it with, so you'll get
mhm.
that, right? And I remember another story where um when my dad visited me once, he met um the grandmother of my ex-wife when we were still married or about to.
Mhm.
And the first thing that she told was like, "Oh, so you're Asian and you're visiting the US. That's cool. So that means that you're good at math and you're a bad driver." Just riled, like, not even
Yeah,
saying it in like the
yeah.
sweetest way, but I think, and it makes me laugh, honestly. It didn't really like offend me too much because she's a sweet old lady, but you'll get that. I can see how you, because of your accent and your descent, like you'll get more of that kind of. And my experience has been like people who look like me aren't really perceived as a threat.
Oh, God.
I mean, it's even kind of like a runaway joke. I remember this one time in New Jersey, I was with my nephew, who's about my age, different story, different episode, and we were coming out of a movie theater, right? And then there were a couple of like townies that were just joking around, and the way they were teasing us was like, "Oh, you guys know kung fu? Like, let's see your kung fu." And it's almost like, bitch, if I really knew kung fu, like this would be no laughing matter, right?
Oh my God, I'm sorry about that. Like whenever I hear people share about those experiences, I'm like, ugh, I feel that. And yet again, both of our experiences are like vastly different. And yet, like, I'm happy that at least we can talk about like the similarities or, try to find the empathy there. I just remember it was really weird because it felt like a movie. Everything looked like a movie because America, all the movies are based there. So I'm like, I feel like I'm in a movie and
Hmm.
there's all these flags and people and they're treating me weird. And it was in Tennessee, which again, I have so much love for that state. Like I feel bad because I feel like we need to do like a rebuttal episode of me just telling all the wonderful things and like support I've gotten there. But I saw the two very distinct types of anti-Semitism as I can define them.
Okay.
Um, which again, it's weird to feel foreign after you've been in Brazil and you've been in jungles and you've been in places where you don't speak the language. And both of those experiences happened in a meeting, in an AA meeting.
The two different types of
So,
anti-Semitism.
yeah, yeah. And that was really interesting to me because I think it added also to my like final kind of place where I'm at today, where I'm disillusioned with the meeting as a thing that gives me this great comfort or whatever.
Hmm.
But again, I was in Tennessee, not gonna say where. And so the first experience I can attest to, um, I was at a meeting, rural Tennessee. I had a friend take me, and I was sharing. I was like the first share. I don't even remember what the fuck I was sharing about at this point. And all the other shares started being about the Israelites and how special they were, and about Jesus and the book of Revelation and all those stuff. And then I realized that evangelical Christians view me, and I started noticing it more as this like mythical unicorn. And they're like, they were too nice to me. Like I wasn't a person. Um,
You're a symbol.
yeah, yeah. Like I was this thing, and that is unpleasant. That is not something I think that I can really explain because it's not like blatant, racism. Um, but having that and having people treat you like you're this, yeah, as you said, like you're this symbol, like you're this something, like you're not the person that you are. Um, that was really that wasn't a nice experience, obviously, sitting in that meeting, having people share about the Israelites. I'm like, okay.
No, and
But
that's
still,
not, I mean, clearly that topic was raised because you were there, right? It's not like for anyone
oh
who's
no,
listening that
the
isn't in an AA meeting, it's not like you walk in and it's like, let's talk about Israel.
yeah, no, the book was the meeting was not about the book of Revelation, I can assure you that. But it seemed like everywhere I went, it it became a topic because of that. I know evangelicals have their own beliefs about like Jewish people and the coming of the Messiah and whatever, but I am I'm in an AA meeting? Like what the fuck are you doing? I'm not this like thing that came to like symbolize anything for you guys. So that was the first thing that made me feel uncomfortable. And then the utter opposite of that happened was that I walked into a meeting and I remember the feeling. Like that's I like I can feel it in my heart now talking about it. Like my heart was like thudding out of my chest. I saw a neo-Nazi, like a skinhead sitting in the meeting.
Yeah.
And for me, that was the first time seeing someone with a huge swastika tattoo. I've never experienced it. I've never seen it. I've seen movies. I've never seen a swastika, like
Yeah.
not in like a museum or whatever. And I was just sitting there and I was like, I and I really wanted to go home. I didn't want to be there. I felt really uncomfortable. I felt unsafe. And I stayed because I thought it was the right thing to do because it's a meeting and it's for my recovery.
And you made yourself known, like you identified, or in that meeting, or no? Is it like,
No, I didn't
okay.
speak, even though people already knew who I was at the time, but I didn't know that guy, obviously. And I had the speaker kind of like point to me and say something about Tel Aviv, and I felt like I was gonna start crying. I did. I once I saw that guy, I went out, I cried. I started crying. I was like really hyperventilating. I can't explain the experience because I can't compare it to this person's experience with race or that person's experience with race, But for me, like I'm a third generation of, Holocaust victims. It wasn't a pleasurable experience for me to see someone in this space that I thought was safe. But again, that's part of the disillusionment of that.
Yeah,
Um, and I ended up praying for him.
yeah. And that is very interesting because you are, because of your experience, I think, of like where you're from, your heritage, your family experience. It's two, to me, they feel like two different receptions that you might get in the States, right? There's like, I'm Jewish from Israel, and then you mentioned like the positive parts of it. But then like in a previous episode, you also touched on the fact that you are also Middle Eastern, right? Which as a blanket statement, hi, I'm from the Middle East, like that could be a completely different reception in the States. And then I mean, you joked about not having a great grandmother, and that's
Yeah,
those are like just different energies. I don't have the words, but you get what I'm saying.
I do. I think I do. I mean, the Middle East thing is, again, I think it goes back to what we mentioned a little bit in the last episode, which is the US concept of black and white.
Mm,
I think that identity is much more complex than that, or at least it was when I was growing up.
yeah.
Um, like I have friends who, live in the West Bank, but they're Israelis, but they're Arabs,
Okay.
but they're Christians. Um, but not to get into the geopolitics of Israel, Jesus Christ, that would be a disaster. But the point is that I mean, I was born there, my mom was born there. I speak this, language that
Mhm.
I understood really quickly, when I was raised with the notion of you shouldn't speak Hebrew outside of Israel.
Oh,
Um, yeah, like you should always speak in English, even though I remember I mentioned
English.
to yeah, always speak English outside of Israel, never speak your language so you wouldn't be targeted in any way, but it's just something I grew up with. But I remember talking to my sponsor on the phone, and we spoke in English. She's American, and I told her, it's a funny thing, like I don't feel comfortable speaking Hebrew because I'm supposed to be my therapist on Zoom and I'm in this Starbucks, and she was like, they'll think it's Spanish.
Do people think it's Spanish sometimes?
I think so.
Really? Because you
Oh,
actually, I mean,
dude.
you haven't spoken in Spanish on the podcast yet, but like, so how many languages do you speak?
Without lying to you, with being totally honest,
Sure.
the the languages I can like say I speak with like a full heart
Hmm.
is three, which is not
Okay.
a lot. My dad speaks like 10, which kudos to him. And also I think it's like that thing of like in Europe, for example, my
Hmm.
friends who are European, they speak five or six languages. That's like their status quo. But I speak Hebrew, English, and Spanish.
Okay.
I can get by or like understand some other languages. But also what defines speaking a language? I'm always baffled by that.
I'd
What
say
would you
like
define as speaking a language?
it has to do with the like the comprehension, right? And also just
Okay.
um being able to converse for me, right? More than the um literacy in terms of like actually being able to read the thing, but if you can communicate with somebody verbally in that
Yeah.
language and be understood and understand, like then I think that's what I personally count. And it's that is an idea that has been fascinating to me because you say it so casually, right? Like, oh, my friends in Europe, multiple languages. It's not something, again, because of the way that I grew up, like there was so much focus on English, specifically American English, right? That I
Mhm.
can't even really say that. So I'm not fluent in Tagalog, right? I'm
Really?
barely conversational. I understand more than I actually speak. Yeah, And that this is a
I'm
function of
shocked
the
by that.
this is a function of the bubble that
You're
I
like
grew
a
up in.
byproduct of this like thing
Yeah,
that
we
is,
have.
I mean, I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, but it's a really interesting observation.
It's interesting that so recently somebody introduced this term to me about being like a third culture kid. And a lot of us who grew up in these international schools kind of identify with that because you're not really one or other, right? So I grew up in a Filipino family, like in the Philippines, but I went to the school that was very Americanized. But I can't say that I identify 100% with either of those cultures. It's almost like this third thing that's an amalgamation of all of it. Um, but still very, I think, very US centric, at least for me, in terms of the way that I look at it. You brought up like the thing about how race and color is perceived over there, and I can relate to it. And it's also been confusing for me. My dad and my uncle grew up in World War II. Like that happened as they were growing up. And when they told me stories, there was a little bit of that confusion. Like, I think the first time that my dad went to the States, it was in the South. And he went there for training as an engineer, and segregation was still very much alive, right? I told you about that. And so I forget like the punchline of the story, but he just related to me how confusing it was for him. Like, so which fountain do I drink from? Which cafe do I sit in? Because they were like across the street from each other. And I think his
Wow.
story was more like he was welcomed into like the white cafe or whatever they call it. They actually had like
Mm.
terms for it. And that was okay. So he was given a pass, but he wasn't sure. He wasn't sure where Asian face kind of fell in. And then my uncle, who was a merchant marine, he had this experience where, um, so we had another uncle who was killed by a Japanese sniper. He was a guerrilla. And in his grief and his rage, they're walking down, I think they were in New Orleans. And so he's walking with some other American GI friends, and they come across this Japanese American. And I think he stabbed the guy. That's the story that I remember. They got into a fight and he stabbed the guy. And when I think about that, like, it's confusing. Like here's a guy who you're on opposite sides of a war. You're processing grief, but then you're also from the same part of the world, and your buddies are probably not seeing you as being too different from this other guy, and yet there's so much rage that you feel. It's so confusing.
I mean, that is such a complex and layered experience, the experience of being Asian in the United States because of that, you know,
And fitting
historical
into and fitting into like the idea of how it's seen there.
and your
Yeah,
identity,
yeah.
your identity is an American. I can't, yeah, no, I can't imagine it. I cannot imagine it. It's because again, I think that I think my experience with the race is just very different. It's just very,
It
I don't
is
know.
different, but then the
It's
lens is
different.
almost it's the same. It
Yeah.
feels to me like it's the same glasses that they're being viewed through, right? Because it's so defined. Like you're coming from, I think we both come from areas of the world where there's more fluidity
Yeah,
in like people
100%.
and where they're from or how they identify. And there's this dream place, which is supposed to be like, its own kind of mecca for freedom and whatever else that it symbolizes. And yet the categories that they tend to like lump people into are so defined.
I mean, that's the US, right?
That's the US. I mean, it is. But I love it so
And
much. I
yet,
mean,
I do. I get it. It's such a weird thing. Again, going back to like I wasn't disillusioned from it after I saw the problems there. And I think it goes back to like what it can be. And like you said it, like I think like I heard you say it in the last episode of like, oh, at least I'm in America.
yeah,
At least I'm in
yeah.
America. Like certain freedoms, are given. And I think that was like kind of like the ethos that maybe foreigners share. And that no matter where you're from, You can make it big in America, You can do this thing. There's no limitations to what you can achieve.
I mean, I've said this before, and I mean, the spirit of it is still true. Like I used to say in early sobriety that if I were to bottom out again, I would prefer that it's in the States as opposed to the Philippines, because my experience of those two countries is
Yeah.
um, the hole that I could fall into in like my native country, my native part of the world, is so much deeper
Mm.
and darker than what I know I would fall into in the States, right? Like, um, and it's I'm not taking away from anyone's suffering or experience, right? But just from like the horror of it, like
Yeah.
parts of LA like Skid Row have like nothing on what you see in other parts of the world.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And yet, like, I don't know. I remember vividly being like, oh, that's America's drug epidemic. Like, that's what it looks like.
That's what it
Okay,
looks
the
like.
fourth guy to fucking collapse on a New Orleans streetcar. I'm like, okay, that's what this is the war on drugs. It's happening.
This is the war on drugs.
Whatever. Dude, no, I remember feeling so like I was in Philadelphia and I'm like, I'm not going outside of this Airbnb right now. Like, I'm just gonna stay inside. I'm in the south of Philadelphia. I'm gonna have some food ordered in, and I'm not gonna
Safety issue?
engage with the city right now. Oh yeah. I'm like,
Okay.
oh, like look at all these needles on the ground. Oh, beautiful. Like it's part of the landscape. No, it was weird. Yeah,
But
America's
safe,
drug war.
but yet strangely safe, I can say. Because I can picture I've been to places that look like that, like in the States, right? But I
Hmm.
never, you know what? I'm more fearful in some parts here. Some parts of the cities
No, I
here.
get
Like,
that.
yeah.
I get that. Like no one, I mean, no one's gonna shoot a missile at me in Philly, in like South Philly.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I mean, missile to little handgun. I think the missile
Yeah.
takes the cake. Is that a saying?
Takes the cake. It is. It's a
Takes the
different
cake.
threat. I'm not gonna touch. I forget it. I'll roll that back for another episode. There's some other threats
Fuck, Mike.
there.
Okay.
No, there's some other threats there that like we don't have here as much. But yeah, on a
What, like
grander
obesity and
scale.
stuff?
I was gonna go say in like so I had school safety concerns like for a while. Do you know what I mean? Like for my kids,
Yay.
because we
Yeah.
don't have the same kind of school safety concerns here. Like I haven't had to worry about like unstable kids like in the Philippines, but it seems to be something that has been a part of like the US experience as a fear.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's a difference. But yeah, no like weapons of mass destruction or shit like that.
Oh, we're getting into it. Okay, fuck it. You know what? Fuck it. I have a lot to say about it. Um, I'm getting into it. So that I was in Tennessee, and
Mm.
I went to this like I think it was like this traveling store, where you get like the boots and the backpacks and
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
Nalgene or whatever. Did you see my Nalgene, by the way? It's a status symbol. I went all the way to go to
No,
the US to get a Nalgene. It's
very good.
nice. It's purple, flax, whatever.
Flex.
So I go into this store
Did you do it? Did you have it
and
at the Sistine Chapel? Wait,
no, no, I did not have the Nalgene in the Sistine. If I were to have Nalgene by the time I was in the Sistine Chapel, I wouldn't have needed to go to the Sistine Chapel. God, Mike, you okay?
your flexes just kill me is all.
I have like yeah, like undercurrent flexes that I just don't address, I guess. We'll talk
All
about
right.
the Sistine Chapel in another episode.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sorry,
it's
go.
a fucking painting. It's fine. Who cares? So the guns. I
So the
walk into
guns.
the store in Tennessee, and the person I'm with is like, "Okay, do you want to see what it looks like the guns?" I walk in and I see these, you know, war guns,
Mm,
AK-47s, machine guns, a fucking, in colors, and they're all displayed like their clothes. And I remember going out and I spoke to that person about it, and he was trying to explain to me, oh, it's a cultural thing. And I'm like, yeah, yeah. Like I come from a country where like I know what war is, you know.
Right.
Um, Guns are not toys, and I saw it and I'm like, clearly, clearly this is weapons of war are not things to play with.
Right.
Again, I did not grow up with that. If I would have grown up in different circumstances, I wouldn't have felt like that.
Yeah.
But um, I think it lacks respect um for what war is. Sorry.
No, no, you're right on. No, no, no. And that's important because it's an important idea in terms of like the experience because we go to this really grand place, right? And I'm sure these guys, a lot of them don't think, maybe some of them think they're toys, but some of them are taking it seriously, but they don't quite see, and I love the way that you phrase it, they don't quite see how they're still kind of toying with it.
I don't know, dude. I'm just like, I just remember seeing it and being like, okay, I got it. I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that took a dark turn. Again, like this is at the end of the day, this is our experiences as of today, because they might change.
Hmm.
Um, did you have any like interesting meeting experiences that you could attest to in the US? Any neo-Nazis that you saw, Pirate Mike?
So I did not surprise the one you made me think about the one experience that I had with a neo-Nazi or Nazi was before I even got sober. I was just, you know, God and my angels sometimes like I don't understand like how it's been a charmed life. So I remember being in this dive bar,
Okay.
a dive bar in Hollywood and with a
As
a
you
couple
do.
friends, as you do. And a couple of Nazis walked in, or people who identified. They were skinheads. They were wearing their little jackets. I saw their little swastikas, and I don't even know if this is true, but I my understanding was that even people who look like me are not exactly welcome. And so I'm like, watch these guys, and I'm gonna hit up these fuckers for a cigarette. And so like, I just walked up to them, tried to be obnoxious, but not too obnoxious, and then like asked them for a cigarette, asked one of them to light it for me. Just basically like tried to see if they were uncomfortable with me being that close to them. Like
Um,
how much could I do that before they hit me in the face? And they didn't hit me in the face,
God.
but that was just like the stupid drunken bravado, right?
Is that a drunk story?
It's a drunk story. There's a lot of drunk stories where like I'll walk up and like laugh at danger, but also with like a safety harness on. So I wasn't
I
fully
feel like,
committed.
Pirate Mike, it's very hard for me to imagine you be obnoxious to anyone. Pirate Mike is the cutest, like kindest human being in the world. So, but I mean, you're allowed to be obnoxious at Nazis.
I
Who
mean,
gives a fuck?
yeah,
If you're a Nazi, Pirate Mike is going to be obnoxious at you.
yeah,
Just FYI.
just FYI. Just FYI.
Yeah, I mean, that experience at a meeting was really interesting. I have been to some cool meetings. I will say that. I'm going out. I'm slowly backing away from shitting on it. Hopefully to a territory where I can attest that AA in the US is great. When if you talk about meetings, there's so much AA there. There's the fucking app. The Do you know the fucking app, Pirate Mike?
There's so many apps. You mean the meeting finder one or
Yeah,
which
the
one?
meeting
Yeah.
finder app. And you go and it's clubhouses and it's like, I don't know, I haven't been to Akron, whatever. I don't think I will be in my lifetime, but I've been to other places. I remember going to this like really cool meetings and a big book study workshop that I really liked and some weird ass clubhouses. Um, but I have this experience that I have to mention because it's been fucking with me the whole week. And I need to enlist the help of anyone who might know what the fuck I'm talking about. So I walk into this clubhouse in Washington. Not gonna go further into the details of that
Okay.
clubhouse. But I walk in and I mentioned this to our friend fucking sober this week because I was like, it just dawned on me this memory that I couldn't shake. You walk into this clubhouse, and it's kind of this cool, hip, famous-ish. I don't know if I can define clubhouses as famous. Fuck this. Like clubhouse. And there's a TV at the entrance, and it's fucking playing fucking sober memes on a loop.
Wait, really?
No, I am dead serious right now. For the past week, I've been gaslighting myself into thinking I'm making it up. I remember it clear as day. I have tried to reach out to people in the DC area to let me know if in some point in time this was a true thing. It's some of the weirdest shit I've ever seen in meetings. And I'm not fucking sure what the fuck happened there. Oy vey.
Wait, did you go into a blackout after you saw the sober memes like playing on a loop? Now you're like, what happened afterwards?
It was just a suppressed memory and it came up and I have no idea. The more I think about it, I'm like, I never took a picture. What if you imagined it? I'm like, no, you didn't. I vividly remember having conversations about this.
I
Anyway,
have
if
that.
anyone remembers the fucking sober meme playing on TV, hit me up. Such a weird thing to have.
Someone's gonna take like a photo or a video and they'll be like, oh yeah, that's my clubhouse, and then send it to us.
I really don't think that if it did exist in a point in time, if someone in some fucked up group conscious thought it was hip and cool and did this thing and it did exist in a point in time, I can assure you it does not exist anymore. It takes one grumpy old timer to be like, well, let me just point you to this tradition.
What are you doing with your no? I just because the grumpy old timer has glasses that they push up.
Yeah. I'm pushing classes. I'm doing the pushing classes movement on Zoom. No,
Now I understand.
I've had this experience in the US too. Mike, did you get to go to the New York World Services?
I did not know. I do have a New York story though, but I can share it
Oh,
after
please do.
yours.
No. I want to
Yeah.
hear your story.
Because that
Yeah.
was actually you're very gentle, like backing away from the darker turn that
The
we took.
guns.
I was fully prepared to be just like, well, enough about Nazis. So what was it like when the Jewish unicorn went to New York? No,
Oh,
my
that's such a great segue. Do you want to
it's a
say it
good
again
segue.
and I'll edit it in?
Yeah, yeah. So enough about Nazis. What happened when the Jewish unicorn went to New York? No,
You know I'm gonna keep it in like that. You
it's
just
it's
know.
it's beautiful. Um, it's one of my actually my favorite early AA memories. It was in my first year. We were in New York City for a business trip. My first time back in New York sober. I've taken short trips to the city over the years, and I think that's why I sustained this like crush on it. But I was feeling what's the fucking phrase? I was um I was feeling antsy or whatever the fuck that is. Like squirrely. I was feeling squirrely.
Ooh,
And
squirrely. Okay.
I was like, where's a meeting? So I used the app to find where the meeting was. And I ended up at this like little clubhouse off of Broadway. You had to take stairs to go up to this like small room on the second floor this is just my memory. Maybe it doesn't even exist. And then when I opened the door, there were a few people huddled around this table list with a tape recorder in the middle of it, and they were listening to the Joe and Charlie tapes. And
Oh my God. Yes,
and
yes, of
and
course.
and the crowd was like, there was this like older lady who was also like a Broadway actress, like a theater actress, and some writers. It was that crowd because that's where I was. And I sat down. I listened to the recording, listened to the
To the
share,
sermon, you mean?
the sermon.
This the
Don't tarnish
Joe
my
and
memory.
Charlie.
Um,
Sorry.
I listened to
Fucking
the
hell.
tape. Um, I listened to the tape and the shares of these like characters, and then there was like a window, right? And then I remember like, and it started to snow, and I was just like, for this little boy from the Philippines,
Oh man.
this is like, this is almost as movie as it gets. You know what I mean? Like, lady who came out of like, who looks like she's like an extra from Sunset Boulevard, like the writer, just the little room and the snow outside, and I'm right off of I'm so close to Times Square. It was perfect. It was so
And
fucking perfect.
the backdrop of the soothing voice of Joe and
Joe and
Charlie.
Charlie. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Who I'd never
No,
heard.
it is.
That was my introduction to Joe
Oh,
and
that was
Charlie.
your Joe and Charlie introduction? Brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
unpaid ad for Joe and Charlie.
Joe and Charlie sermons. That's what you're saying. I
Yeah.
won't ask you anymore about that.
It's so perfect. Oh no, it's such a cute memory. And New York is such a mystical thing. I remember I went, okay, so this is my getting to New York story, and it's hella embarrassing, obviously. So I went, this was already 2 years traveling, already did the US. New York was the final stop, right?
Hmm.
I got on the Amtrak from Philadelphia to New York. And I was so anxious the whole time. I'm like, oh my God, like this is happening. I'm doing it. And I all of a sudden I see this skyline coming up, and I start bawling. I start
Yeah,
crying on the Amtrak. It was New
yeah.
Jersey.
Oh,
I started crying at New Jersey. Like, I don't know if it was like fucking Syracuse or whatever, but I started bawling. And I was like, someone's like, no, this is New
this is
Jersey.
that.
No, it was New York. But what happened when I get off the Amtrak, you go underground. If you take the Amtrak from Philly to New York, don't expect a view because it's underground. And I switched to the subway. And
Yeah,
I'm on the New York subway, and I start just bawling again. I'm like crying. I had moments in New York where I just started openly crying, like randomly, because it was such a huge thing for me. I was just an emotional wreck from excitement and just like I've made it. I just felt that little girl who, in all of the insanity of drug abuse and alcohol abuse, still had a dream, and I fulfilled it, and I made it to the thing, and I
yeah,
was
yeah,
there. I
yeah,
was there.
yeah. Actually thought you were going to say, so I had the wrong skyline, but then I came up and walked into Grand Central Station. I thought that's where your story was
No, it
going to be,
wasn't Grand Central. I
because that would
wish it
be
was.
no.
No, it was just like a random subway. I don't know what train
You're
it
so
was.
you're so crying.
I'm just bawling. But it was such a wonderful experience there in New York City. And yeah, just having that dream being fulfilled, and meeting I had a friend that I met in Madrid, and I met him there, and we went to this meeting together, and just I managed to see all of New York in like a span of 5 days or something. I still want to
Nice.
visit soon, hopefully. But my little I have a little anecdote because I did go to the World Service, the fucking what's it fucking called? The central office
Oh yeah,
in
yeah,
New York. The World Services.
yeah.
There it is.
AA World
I
Services.
have
Yeah,
you can't see, but I have like 2 pages of highlighted stuff because I'm
it's a
because
three-parter. It's a
Israelis.
three-parter for sure.
It's a three-parter. Israelis are really, in our segment of our new segment of perpetuating stereotypes. Israelis are really opinionated.
Mm,
That was a segment. Um, so when I got my last day in New York, I went to the World Service. I had a fever. I started getting really sick my last day in New York, and being there was like a fucking fever dream. I was extremely ill. Um,
yeah,
they had all these like cool archives and books, and it was this store that you had to get into, and it was a great piece of real estate, right? Like
I'm sure.
awesome. But it was so fucking odd. And then they started explaining like the simplified version of the big book, and it sounded like they're trying to convince the people on the tour and themselves that it's a good idea of like, let me tell you about the simple language version of the big book. Let me sell you on these random AAs. And I'm like, okay, I'm not the person who's gonna be sold on this, but
Right,
thanks.
right.
I
Interesting. They were pushing that there.
I don't know if they were pushing it, but it came up, and they were really trying to over explain themselves. Is what I remember.
Oh, that just kind of ruined it for me. They
Oh.
I'm
Very.
like, I'm like, yeah, that took some effort. I had to. No, I don't know if I want to visit.
It's like an office building, honestly. It's like an office building. They
Mm,
have really cool literature, I will say that. They have some really cool materials and archives, but it's just like, oh yeah, this is where it goes. This is okay. So like here's the coffee machine that I paid for.
that I paid for.
You wanna know where all your money goes? People who feel like they're doing service by putting a lot of money in the seventh tradition. You go to the World Services in New York and you tell me if it's worth it.
That's hilarious. How? So this is what you're putting my hard-earned seven tradition dollars into.
And that was an hour and a half on capitalism.
We'll pick it up again soon.